everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're talking to Rachel Patterson.
Yeah.
And sorry, I always mix that up, but we have a Patterson health center here in town. So it's like, it should be easy for me to remember. But she has a YouTube channel called LDS Women and Priesthood. And it's not just for women, it's for everybody. And, she's going to be doing more work with the channel, could spill over into other topics as well. But she reached out with my invitation for anyone that's a sister in the church. If you have a YouTube channel, or if you want to start a YouTube channel, then I will interview you and help promote the channel, because I'm trying to help along the mission of what President Kimball said about women in the church in the last days, and the big role that they're going to play in bringing in many people into the church, and especially attracting the good women of the world who will in turn bring their families with them. So I felt that it would be a good thing for me to do with my platform. And so here she is. And so Rachel, okay, first of all, she's in North Carolina. That's where she's at. And she's originally from Vermont. Now, have you been a member of the church your whole life, or how long you been a member of the church?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I call myself a convert kid, and it's funny because I have a few friends that fall into this category where my parents joined the church and both went on missions. My dad was actually joined the church from missionaries doing phone tracting, wow. Which is kind of he's a special guy. And at some point he had actually been on his mission for longer than he had been a member. So he was the thing about wow. Converts is like you join the church and then they got married, and then you start your great experiment, right? Which is, are we going to make a family that can stay true to the gospel? And I was their experiment. They ended up having 5 girls. And then they raised us in Vermont. My mom was baptized before her mission, obviously, in the Sharon, Vermont ward, which is the birthplace of Joseph Smith. So, they're both converts, and they did a good job, I think.
Yeah, that's really great. I'm glad that that's been your life. And then you've told me before that in that area, so that's the place where he was born, and also the place where he had the famous story about having his leg worked on. That was also in that area.
Yeah, that area is like maybe 30 minutes apart. And so you have the Joseph Memorial who was born, and then across the river into New Hampshire, you have Dartmouth College. And then you have just south of it is Lebanon, New Hampshire, which is where the KFC is there, where we would go all the time, which is where his original home used to be, and which is where the doctor from Dartmouth College came and did the operation on his leg. And what's funny is there's like a rivalry between New Hampshire and Vermont, and we're always, so members of the board, I would say, well, Joseph Smith was born in Vermont. It's a special state. And then my other friends would say, yeah, and it was so terrible. They left and went to New York. It's a pretty rough winters. But what's funny is like the prophecy that he would be known for good, and he would be known for good and ill, or good and evil around the world. Like, what's so funny about growing up there is the people that are there have no idea the memorial is there. They have no idea of his significance. I was on a bus going to a soccer game, and one of my friends stopped and was like, hey, you're Mormon, right? You know that Joseph Smith? I'm related to him. He's from the crazy side of the family. And I was like, you have no idea what he has achieved.
No, they don't. It's really neat to talk to somebody from that part of the country, because I don't think I've ever met anybody from Vermont that was a member of the church. And it's kind of weird, because since I've been doing this invitation to the sisters of the church, like I've talked to a lot of people, mostly from the Midwest. I thought that I'd have more like in Utah. I did. I think her name was Rebecca, if I remember, from Arizona, but it's all pretty much been Midwest. And now we have you. I know that right now you're in North Carolina. So, but you're from, the East, you're from the eastern part of the country. So it's nice to have that diversity and to get your perspective. Now, how was it that you decided to start this channel? Like, what's the whole story, and where do you plan on going with it?
Sure. I mean, one of the reasons that I really enjoyed your channel and why I reached out is because the similarities between the talks about the millennium and LDS women in priesthood are so similar. So every time, and you really, when you talked about your video about President Kimball, when he talks about women, or when President Nelson talks about women in the priesthood, he's always a paragraph later or a sentence later, he will mention the second coming. In Joy D. Jones talks, Oakes talks, and so I was like, there's a connection here about the kind of instruction that they're giving us as women. I was deployed, my husband's in the military, he's in special forces, and he was deployed when President Nelson gave his, I like to call it like his watershed talk, 2019, which was the talk where he was called Spiritual Treasures, where he talks about the priesthood restoration being the priesthood restoration harmony. And then he immediately goes in and says, I wish that all of you could truly understand that the priesthood is just as important for women as it is for men. And then later in the talk, he says, and you've done such a good job highlighting the phrase, like, I urge you, I plead with you, I entreat you. He says, I entreat you, sisters, to study all you can about the truths of the priesthood. So for most women, we were like, what just happened? It was a bit of a, I think it was like a moment for a lot of us, because, and this comes back to maybe the context of being raised in the Northeast. People don't realize, like, the kind of women's movement is also has its roots in the Northeast. So when my family would drive to Palmyra, we would drive, through northern New York and into New York State and then to Palmyra, but we would pass Seneca Falls, which is where the first women's suffragette movement, like women's convention, was held. So I think the women's concerns were kind of something that I was raised around, not necessarily in, but I remember like the 80s and the 90s, knowing women that really had concerns about the priesthood, concerns that it wasn't equal. And
sorry, at that time you were in the New England area.
Yeah, I was raised my whole life in Vermont. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Vermont, New Hampshire. Yeah. So what happened with the ordained women movement, and this is another parallel that I see with your channel, and like one of the things you've done so well is, just because you have this fixed mindset about how you think the millennium will happen is limiting you in seeing how it is happening. And I think what happened with the ordained women movement, which was a movement in the 80s and 90s, which said women deserve to be equal, women deserve to be ordained, and the leaders of that movement were excommunicated. I think what it did is it gave this kind of fixed mindset perspective to women in the church that in order to have priesthood power in your life, you must be ordained. But that's not what President Nelson is teaching us. He's teaching us that priesthood power is coming into your life through covenant making and covenant keeping. So after that talk, 2019 happened, I was really excited, along with a lot of other women, to really study the words of the living prophet on it. And I have a background in Middle Eastern studies, and I've worked in the Middle East, and then I was an instructor at the time.
If you don't mind, just really quick,
Sure.
Where in the Middle East were you, or where did you
so I was so I did Middle Eastern studies at BYU and then at Dartmouth, and I got a job at for a while I worked for a medical company out of the Gulf states, so like Qatar, Bahrain, Dubai, and then I got a better job, which I was excited about, at the US Embassy in Baghdad. And I was there for 3 years. And that's where my husband and I had gone to we'd gone to undergrad at BYU together. We met in the Arabic program, met up again, and obviously fell in love and got married, came back to North Carolina. And I started teaching Middle Eastern studies in Special Forces Warfare College there. And the thing about teaching there, which I think has a parallel, was that I was teaching principles and concepts that I needed to give to guys that they could actually go use in their, like, apply in their actual life. And I noticed a disconnect between the things I was teaching them and their ability to absorb it in a way that they could apply. Like, it's one thing to know all the political theory about the Middle East, but can you take it and make it meaningful? And there's something very similar with learning for women to learn about priesthood, because what do we call, when in church we call it young women's and priesthood, called Relief Society and Priesthood. So there's this tutoring that men have been given, that I think is helpful for the line up online principle. And now we're kind of in this position where we're trying to learn priesthood structures and priesthood power. So I made my channel because I came up with this idea of like, this is a fun diagram that I think helps us understand how priesthood relates and how to, it's like a circle and a heart. And it shows how the priesthood in the church versus the priesthood that you see in the temple work, and made a few foundational videos about that. And then I got called as young women's president in my ward. And so my channel kind of like fell to the wayside because that was a pretty daunting task. But then I got to practice teaching it to the girls and see what worked and what didn't, and see how to make it more relatable on a real level for young women as well.
That's really cool. And I'm glad that you've felt prompted to do that, that you're doing it, because I think there probably is a segment of the church that is confused when it comes to these topics. And so, you know, I have my focus on my channel with what I do, church news, Millennium, stuff like that. But we need people that can cover all these different topics. And, I wouldn't be able to do it as well as you're doing it. And there's other people that are not doing it. And so you're giving that segment of the church another source to listen to outside of church. Not that we, should first go to things outside the church, but like, President Nelson has stressed, when it comes to social media and the internet, stop. Who are you? Who is influencing you? And then reassess and maybe cut some voices out that are influencing you to against church doctrine. And by you doing this channel, you can influence people for good and kind of fight the other side that's making the other points. So I think it's really good. Again, everybody, if you feel it within you to do a YouTube channel, Facebook group, whatever it is, just find your talents, follow promptings, consecrate your time and talents, and you'll be good, and you'll be doing good in the world. And so that's what Rachel is doing, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm sure that you're going to get a lot of blessings for doing that. It's really interesting when it comes to the differences between men and women in terms of priesthood and our eternal destinies, because one way that I've always looked at it, and I think that this is like really deep actually, like when you think about a computer is a system, and it does things for you. It's useful, and it's composed, really, if you think about it, of three different parts. You have the hardware, which is like the physical stuff, the mouse, the keyboard, monitor, the things that are like tangible, they're hard, you touch them. But hardware without software or like programs is worthless. It's worthless. You can't, it's just a paperweight unless you have software to run on the hardware. And so when I read, for example, Genesis, and it says that Adam was created first, I kind of associate in this like metaphor Adam to like hardware. You have to have a mouse, you have to have a screen before you can start doing computer things. But once that's established, once you have the hardware, then you can start using the software, which is not tangible. It's more abstract. But like it can do incredible things. Like just like right now, you and me talking, I'm in Kansas, you're in North Carolina, and it's because of the software that's running on the hardware. And then of course, the third part of a computer, so to speak, would be the user. And so the way I see it is that in a celestial marriage, you have the hardware and software together. Now that they function together, and then God is like the user. He's the third part of the marriage, and it directs that, because you basically become a system that produces things, and so I think it's like really deep. And so when it comes to priesthood, the hardware is more obvious, it's more out there, it's more tangible, because like you go to church, you have the bishop up on the stand, you have, you know, like you were saying, we use the term priesthood, but women are more subtle, they permeate more throughout society. It's well known that men are usually more kind of like individual oriented, like I'm okay not really having any friends here in Kansas, but my wife needs other women to connect
Yeah.
to because they're more like a network. And I think that that's meant to be, you know. So anyway, those are my kind of like ramblings about it. But I think that the whole priesthood question, everybody knows that in order for you to go to the temple, men have to be ordained, they have to receive, they have to have the priesthood, but women don't. And so the implication there is that there's something very, very special going on with women.
Well, thank you for like encouraging me and encouraging this. One of the things that has been so interesting about studying this is the question of like, we really, I think as, and you're learning, I think as President Nelson, President Oaks, and some of the other, like, as they're teaching us live these little tidbits about women's relationship to priesthood power, I think we're learning about men's relationship to priesthood power. And one of the questions that I think a lot of women have been asking is why now? Because a lot of women have been asking questions about women's relationship to priesthood for a long time, but they're revealing it now. And the reason that I think they are, I don't know all, I can't know for sure, but one of the reasons that I think that the prophet has seen fit to reveal and teach us about women's relationship to priesthood power is because we are preparing for the second coming. And it's almost like a chessboard. And he's putting, so when you learn any kind of skill that needs to be used, you need time to learn the training, and then you need time to put it into practice. But one of the things that priesthood is meant to do, and like as I was studying it more and more, because I think there was a period of time where, especially if you're using non-prophetic sources to study priesthood for women, if you're using random fringe professors' books, then you look in the notes section and they have no references to President Nelson or President Oaks or Joseph Smith. There is a counterfeit out there, which I think empowerment is not power in terms of priesthood power. Like priesthood power is God's power. And what is it? It's a phrase that Oaks says, which is like delegated responsibility, which I really love, which he's saying God has power and he is the one that is delegating it to men and women differently for his own purposes. But he's revealing it right now because he's putting women in place. And for them to be in place for the second coming and the millennium, they need to understand the priesthood power that's available to them, and for men and women to understand how it works collaboratively, in the temple, outside the temple. But one of the things that I really noticed is the world's counterfeit of power is making men and women more separate and independent from each other. And that's, for me, that's always a tell when someone is maybe going a bit, I would say it's a little bit of a red flag if I hear a woman talking about priesthood and the way she's talking about it is really separating her from men or putting like contention between the two, because priesthood power really is at its best bringing us together, making us really unified in our purpose. And that's one thing that I think Sister Bingham gave a really good talk about, that where she talks about how priesthood power is God's power, and it's meant to make men and women unify and collaborate at the best possible level that they could.
Yeah. Again, because I think why is because it becomes a system. Like men and women function together, and then in terms of like this progression, and I don't want to say in the context of like progressive, the political movement. I'm talking about the progression of the Earth's history. Well, one thing that we know is that everything is line upon line, precept upon precept. So there's like a continual move toward higher and higher principles. And we know that the earth itself is going through a kind of progression, and everything's progressing to where we get to the millennium, where we go from a telestial condition to now a terrestrial condition. Everything is being moved up a level. And it would make sense that many different things are affected, including women responsibilities. And who knows what kind of things might be revealed in the millennium, because we don't know everything. Christ might have things reserved right now that when he comes, he'll be like, okay, now we're going to be doing this. Women, I want you to do this. Who knows what's in store? Because the thing is that the story is not over. But these are really interesting things, like you said, that President Nelson is talking about, his emphasis on women. And then not only him, but one thing that still just blows my mind is President Eyring's talk called Sisters in Zion, where he was in no uncertain terms saying that the women right now are going to be the ones that are primarily responsible and play a huge hand in creating a Zion society, which we know is an important step toward the second coming and receiving Christ. So it's amazing to see just what's happening now compared to the past, and how there's these things that are happening.
Yeah. Like, I
So
don't know. This is a question that I did have for you was like, I know the people, I think the apostles and prophets, a lot of them have like issues that they are particularly concerned about. And the like to get an entire like, President Nelson wasn't really talking about women and priesthood. I would say President Ballard is actually always the one that I'm always ready to. He has had such remarkable insights about priesthood power and how it relates to family and eternity. President Packard, and obviously President Oaks. But President Nelson's thing is gathering of Israel. And I noticed in his talks that as he talks about, we're talking like the 2000 teens, he's talking about the gathering of Israel. He's talking about the gathering of Israel, and he's talking about it to the women's session, and he's stressing their importance in the women in the gathering of Israel. And I'm biased because I'm from a family of 5 girls, and my dad is amazing. He had 5 girls. And I was like, I really think it's no mistake that he has 9 daughters. President Nelson has 9 daughters. And there's
yeah,
truly no person that could know women better than a father of multiple women. Like, dads who are good dads, who have lots of girls, understand the subtleties of women and young women so well. So he has been trained to become attuned to the needs, the special talents, the special offerings that women have his entire life with all those girls. And you can see it in his talks, like gathering Israel, women in the gathering of Israel, women in the gathering of Israel. And that's when he starts talking about his experiences in the temple with Wendy. And he comes out of the temple and he says, I really hope you sisters know the kind of power that's available to you and how much we need you to understand that. And that's when it just kind of blows open. And it validates a lot of other women in women's conference being able to talk about it. But he still is the main source of this. That's one thing that is also interesting, is like, this topic of women and LDS, covenant keeping women and priesthood, right? Because that's the relationship, is being a covenant keeping woman and the priesthood power that comes. The only person that we really should be looking to is President Nelson, because it's such uncharted doctrinal territory.
yeah,
Like, they've never talked about this before. Maybe Joseph Smith. And when we look back at like Kirtland, it wasn't Wilford Woodruff and Brigham Young and Joseph Smith all sitting around talking about the priesthood, having a group discussion. It was Joseph Smith revealing from God the way that God wants the priesthood order to go. And so that's why I really like your channel for that reason, that you stay really true to the original sources of prophets and apostles. And that's what I'm trying to do with my channel. Is there's no reason to go off and read some philosophical academic book. Like, the prophet is giving us a lot.
Mm.
An overwhelming amount to chew on, to meditate on, and to deal with.
Yeah. And I'm learning through this channel that there's been so many things said, even though I've been a lifelong member, you've been a lifelong member, that we still haven't, like, for example, this recent video that I did about Wilford Woodruff saying that the four angels have been
Yeah.
released. And that's something that I know for a fact many people are like, they read Revelation and think, oh yeah, that still hasn't happened yet. It has, apparently. And I have another video coming out with another thing from Wilford Woodruff, a vision that he had. That's going to come out on Sunday. But um yeah, we should really look to the prophet and what he's saying. I find that a really interesting insight about President Nelson and his many daughters, because he has made mention of that almost specifically. And what I think what it tells me is that, obviously the Lord planned it this way, that he would have so many daughters.
Yeah.
And it's just like you said, it's given him experience, insight, and it was probably kind of like a training for him for this stage that the church is at right now. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that's amazing.
I
But
think it gets
yeah,
I think it gets overlooked because we always talk about him being a surgeon.
yeah,
But honestly, having daughters, having 9 daughters, I remember thinking when he became a prophet, thinking he is going to teach such amazing things to women because he understands them so well. You
yeah.
like, yeah. That brings back core memories of my dad being immersed in basically what looked like a sorority in high school. You know?
Yeah.
I did have a question for you though, like on that note, like when you follow certain themes in the gospel, you start recognizing that certain prophets and apostles have their areas of concern that they're
Mhm.
really seeking like one of my videos that I did in the past where I really felt it was important to um give people a like an actual like see how many prophets have taught us about the importance of premortal life and the value of unborn life. And I was surprised how few people understood the abortion argument. I made those videos 2 years ago and then they went viral
Yeah.
whenever things get politically interesting. But I could have predicted that either Neil L. Anderson, it would have been Neil L. Anderson, Elder Christensen, or President Russell M. Nelson honestly have been the most outspoken on that specific topic of abortion in general conference. So when Neil L. Anderson gave that talk, I had said to my husband, he was one of them that I would have predicted because they would leave little breadcrumbs in their talks over the years. They might not give an entire talk, but you can tell they're seeking guidance and revelation on that issue. And so I wondered for you, are there certain apostles that you think that you notice they bring it up more than others?
One that always stands out to me is Elder Bednar. And I don't know it's necessarily because of a certain theme. I don't know if it's because of his age, because I remember when he was first called, it was like, oh, he's kind of young compared to the rest of the Quorum of the 12. But it's kind of like his spirit and the way that he shares things. So that kind of stands out to me. Um, and then, of course, President Nelson with the Gathering of Scattered Israel, simply because I've said this a million times on the channel. The first time I ever heard that was in the Madrid MTC, because he was there. He talked to a group of 20 of us, and he was thinking about that all the way back in 2004. Um, so yeah, they do have their own different things, and you have to wonder if, well, and I'm sure that it probably has a lot to do with how they were trained in the pre-existence.
Hmm.
They probably had certain missions to accomplish here, each individual, each tackling a different issue. And then they come here, they receive the necessary experience, training, in the case of President Nelson, having all those daughters. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's been any other ones. I think it's been interesting that Elder Rasband has been so involved as far as like religious freedom and connecting with other religious groups. Uh because I think that that's an important stage. Or right now we're in an important stage leading up to the actual kingdom of God being established, as far as like the political kingdom, and connecting with many different religions to help a smooth transition and to let them know that we love them. They can still worship how they want to. So I'm kind of fascinated by a lot of them. I don't know if that answers your question,
No,
but
that does, because honestly, it's like I know the people that I'm always paying attention to when I want to hear more on this topic. If Elder Ballard gets up, I'm listening to every word, because he might only give you a sentence in a talk. It's very rare to get an entire talk about women in the priest. Like that 2019 talk, Spiritual Treasures, was very rare. It was almost exclusively about women's relationship to the priesthood, but most of the other times it's a paragraph here or there that relates to a talk about something else. I think Ballard, Oakes, and obviously now Russell M. Nelson. And I think a lot of that is because he is the one to teach it.
yeah,
Because it is uncharted doctrinal territory. We've
yeah,
never really, I think you can say back in the Kirtland Temple days, Joseph Smith was obviously, I think it was like the 22nd of May, I don't remember what year, that women attended the School of the Prophets, and Joseph Smith instructed them about, temple ordinances and things like that, and instructed them on elements of the priesthood. So, and he was the one to do it because he was the prophet. So I think that's one thing to recognize when we're learning about this, is that I think sometimes people can think that activism is so, like, example, the ordained women movement was kind of, the leaders of the ordained women movement were excommunicated in like 2014. In 2015, 2014, you had a couple talks about it. And so it can give you the impression that revelation is provoked by activism, if that makes sense. Like if we get loud enough, we get angry enough, that will make them change or make them say
yeah,
something. But that, I just don't think, we don't believe that. We believe that really revelation comes to the prophet at the time that God sees fit.
mhm,
And I do believe that there is a purpose. Maybe it's because I feel for those women in the 1980s who really wanted more knowledge about it, but it just wasn't the time. And so they were kind of left a little lost. And I feel lucky to be alive right now when there's more teaching, live teaching being given to women. And it's making our temple experiences so meaningful to have the knowledge that we've been given just in the last 5 years about covenant keeping and the way that you access priesthood power. That's another thing they'll always say, emphasize. Oakes will emphasize this, and Ballard. No blessing of the priesthood will be denied to women who keep their covenants.
yeah.
Like, yeah.
So I mean, here's the thing. I think this is something a lot of people don't understand. Okay, so one of my big things on the channel is I really dive in as much as I can into Judaism.
Yes.
And it's a hard thing to do. It's very complex. It's like hard to understand sometimes all their different texts, their traditions, what they do. But when you learn about them, you start to understand that the priests, which are the Kohanim, and the Levim, the Levites, they're still preserved. They're very important. When you look at what they wore in the temple and what they do wear today, because they have those same robes and stuff ready for when the third temple is constructed, it's only the male members of that priesthood that would officiate in the temple. You go back to Old Testament times, you go to the temple to bring your sacrifice, you'll encounter the Levites working around the temple. Maybe there'll be a choir, or they'll be playing instruments as you're in the court there. And then you see the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron's, that are actually offering the sacrifices. And then you may see the high priest himself, all of them wearing special clothing, robes, beautiful, holy, only men. Now we have modern day temples, and I'm just going to say that's not the case anymore. If you've been to the temple, that's not the case anymore. So what does that tell you? If you were to tell that to a Jewish person, if they were to like, if they were allowed to like go through and dissect the temple and men and women in the temple, they would probably be blown away. They'd be like, what?
That's a
And
good.
and so I think a lot of times what happens is people aren't familiar with that part of the doctrine, how things were with the ancient temple, how things are now. But secondly, I think some women, in this could be men too, but they think in terms of power, or they think in terms of being special, or influence, or things like that. And so they view the priesthood as though it's like a superhero gift. Like, why can't we be superheroes too? And they have a fundamental misunderstanding of what it is, and that women are critical in it. The reason why we didn't have women in the ancient temple is because we were doing the Mosaic law, and it wasn't. And who knows? I don't know that we know everything about that temple either. But the fact of the matter is that the temple today is stunning compared to what we do in there now, compared to what was done before, and what women do in there. And anyway, I'm just kind
Yeah,
of
and I
rambling,
mean,
but
I haven't quite clarified what I think about, but the press statement about certain certain roles that women now can, like, is the word officiate. It was a couple
oh
years
yeah,
ago.
yeah,
It was a press statement where they're like, women can now stand as this position in the temple. That's so cool that I think that there's revelation coming that's like, I like your analogy of a system. And I also like the analogy of a chess game where, and we also have another system like the tribes of Israel, which you've mentioned, which is certain tribes have certain delegated responsibilities. And who knows why that's their, the tribe of Ephraim, or I just think it's the way that the Lord, but I think one of the things that you brought up too is, like a, like, I don't want to demonize feminism, but if you go to like the original source, because everyone has a different definition of it right now.
yeah.
But if you go to the original source, like thought leaders, Marx, Betty Friedan, the concept of feminism is that there's a competition for a limited resource between genders, and that limited resource is power. And so it puts men and women at odds with each other because they're both competing for the limited resource of power. And so if you are a woman and you are taking a feminist lens to analyze priesthood, all you will see is a power grab. And you will see, well, men have more than we have. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which is one reason why I felt the need to start this channel. I'm assuming people are 45 minutes into this conversation, so they'll be interested enough, but I did feel like people were taking a feminist lens for the power of God. And it's a totally different divine system. It's a totally different, and the ultimate goal. So, right, we have a worldly ideology that's creating a power competition between genders. And then we have a divine system that is so about collaborating men and women together that we have Elohim, right? We have the singular plural of Heavenly Mother and Heavenly Father being so united that they may as well be like one person. And that's, you'll know what topic I'm interested in, because I always like to splice together videos of conference talks. It's almost like if you're writing a paper and you need your proofs.
Yeah.
Like, that's the proofs. Like, these are what the prophets have said.
Yeah.
So that people at a minimum can know what the doctrine is right now. Yeah.
Well, I guess this will get a little bit deep. I recently, for anyone watching, I did this interview talking to the Israeli Levite Nazarite, and we got into a discussion about Kabbalah. It's not something that we practice. I don't know if any of that will be restored, but they have a tradition that it descends through Abraham, and it has a lot to do with this concept of the tree of life, which essentially what it is, it's like a diagram of God. Essentially, that's really kind of what it is. You have God, and what the way that they view it is that, there's an impersonal, well, I don't know if I impersonal, but there's a God, uh not with a body, but you have God the way that most Christians think of God, and that he has masculine and feminine attributes. Looking at that tree of life, you have the different sephirot. You have like one on this side, one on this side. This one's more masculine, this one's more feminine. And the idea is to come to the way that you should live your life is you come together, like you don't go to like extremes. Like, for example, justice and mercy. We all know they're both needed. They are separate, they're both needed, but to get the best result, you bring them together. And when that happens, you have Christ. Christ is in the middle, and he's the one that makes this entire thing work. It's because those two extremes are able to meet in the middle. And you can do that with any number of things. I can't think of any at the top of my head, but you always have like this duality between all these different concepts, and there's extremes. And so what's interesting and what makes me think that they might be onto something a little bit is that while we don't believe that there's just one God and he has masculine and feminine, we believe that there's a heavenly father and a heavenly mother. And what that diagram might actually be diagramming is him and her together in this system, creating life and governing, what's within their governance. And in the tree of life, it's not one side is lower than the other side. They're like equal, and then they come together at a point at the top that's called the crown. I don't know the Hebrew word for it, but there's like a middle path, and like at the top there's the crown. But anyway, it's symmetrical, it's equal, both sides are needed, they come together, and then that's when you have the tree of life. And so I think it's just sometimes people that are genuine just don't understand that, and they might get confused by some of the worldly philosophies. But then you have people that are narcissistic, power hungry. They're not concerned about the truth, they just want that status or that special, to feel special or feel like they have power, and that's all that it's about for some of them. So anyway,
I appreciate that insight because my background on Islam. So we lived in Morocco and Iraq. We lived with families, and so I've studied a lot about Islam. What's interesting about Islam?
and sorry, really quick,
Sure.
do you speak Arabic?
I studied I studied Egyptian at BYU, and then we went to Morocco. So then I basically ended up speaking this really kind of funky kind of Arabic. So yes, I do. And then I went to Baghdad and I was mostly reading modern standard. But we actually, as a family, might end up getting to go to Jordan in the next 2 years. So I've already started brushing up on my Levantine, which I could like hope, because I don't feel like my time in the Middle East is over. But I was going to tell you is what's so fascinating about the restored gospel and what you were talking about with like the idea of God is like in Islam, which is one of the three Abrahamic religions, right? Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And Islam and Judaism have so much overlap. But one of the things about the Quran says that God is everywhere and nowhere, right? God is so intangible and ethereal that even now, if you look at modern Islamic films or movies, if they ever want to depict, it's so haram to depict God in any way because God is not a body. God is everywhere and nowhere. So the way that directors will work around it is they will view from a camera lens, and they will have the camera lens looking into the film be like depicting the eye of God, right? Okay. So it really is radical. That's the landscape we have, is that God is everywhere and nowhere. We have the Trinity. So for Joseph Smith to say, God appeared to me and he has a body and he looks like me, is completely revolutionary. And now we have And that's what's so funny to me about people being like, we need to know more about Heavenly Mother than we have. I'm like, are you kidding me? We literally know that we believe that not only does God have a body, but divine beings have gender. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
When you look at the three Abrahamic religions and you say we've come from everywhere and nowhere and an ethereal being to a person with a body, a father, like, heavenly father, a parent, and now we know that they have two different gender. I think that's completely amazing. When maybe it's lost on us because it's all we've known if you've been Mormon your whole life, but
Yeah,
it's pretty remarkable to believe that.
it is. And man, it's so deep, it's so important. And really, the man and the woman, the masculine and feminine, they really govern like all aspects, I think, of reality itself. It's so deep. So it just, hopefully people can understand it from this point of view rather than just simply seeking power or whatever. um and I hope that your channel thrives. It looks like it's
Thanks.
doing really good with what you've done so far. uh I want everyone to subscribe to
Thanks.
Rachel because she's gonna go far. She's already at 1,000 and she's had some videos that have gone viral. It's a great channel.
Thanks.
And so and then with the future of your channel, are you mostly gonna just stick with these kind of topics, or do you think you'll cover anything else?
I
Because
think, yeah.
one thing that is kind of unique with you is that you have this understanding of Islam, um, Arab culture and stuff, and maybe that'd be good to see some of that sometimes. I would certainly be interested in that because I think that they're going to have a big role to play in the millennium, and that they're special people.
I had not thought of that. I think right now I have so much. I think I will change the format because the like high quality, honestly, I wasn't expecting the videos to be as popular as they were. I honestly made the first videos because I wanted to teach this class in my ward. And then I wanted my bishop to know exactly what he was going to teach. So he would know this is all aligned with the gospel. This is doctrinal. And so then so I made those more, but that format of like high takes a lot of work and it's kind of unsustainable. So I could see myself doing more just low maintenance videos where we mine some of these important talks and go in depth about like, and I really am fascinated with well, this is a question I kind of had for you. The millennium, we're told that in the end nothing will be withheld. And here we are looking at the millennium being close, second coming being close, and they're talking about LDS women and priesthood power in the same paragraph all the time as they mention the
Mhm.
millennium. So I think that is another maybe like sign almost that like things that have been withheld up till now are now being taught.
Yeah.
And maybe it's subtle, but they are. So I wondered with you though, I had a question about one like question that I had while I have time with you is even though the second coming is close, when things happen in our country or things happen in the world, how do you handle like not I always still freak out. I still always am caught off guard and stressed, and when things like that happen, how do you handle that?
Well, I avoid um doomsday thinking, and this is actually, I know that this is a concept within psychology, that sometimes people experience anxiety because of their thought patterns, and sometimes they envision things that are not tied to reality. That people think about worst case scenarios, and then their system reacts based on that. And so uh, I try to stay away from that. But I try to not just like do it just because. I try and ground that in reality, just like I try and do with any topic that I study. And what I see in reality, when you read general conference talks and you study um, the general authorities, the scriptures, is that we should have hope in that the great and dreadful day of the Lord will be dreadful for the wicked, and it's going to be great for the righteous. And I know that there's discomfort because we know We know that things are going to ramp up. They'll just probably continue to get worse. Yes. But one thing that I point out all the time is that things have been getting worse ever since Joseph Smith's time, and yet we're okay. Like, there's not a nuclear bomb going off over there in the neighbor's yard. It's okay. Gas prices are high. I'm not too happy about all the contention that happened with the coronavirus and people not treating each other very nicely. We've had riots, there's earthquakes, there's tsunamis, there's all sorts of things. And I just don't think that there's going to be a situation where everything all at once, like everyone's going to be screwed. I think that the Lord has a way of protecting his people. And then there might be some casualties, or you might have to go through some stuff, but you'll be okay. He'll protect you. And that one thing that they keep bringing up in general conference is that there's protection in keeping your covenants, making covenants, keeping covenants. That's one of our surest ways to feel safe and be protected. And also in my life, okay, where I'm at right now doing this, being a YouTuber and having a relatively successful channel, this was something that I did not plan at all. When I got out of high school, what I wanted to do was go into accounting because I thought that was a smart move. There's a lot of demand for accountants, and there always will be, most likely, until AI takes over. And I had a radically different plan, and I followed promptings, and every single time those promptings have proven to be correct. So I'm not so scared about the future because I've learned that I'm not very good at predicting the future, and things actually do turn out good by following promptings. Not to say that the path won't be hard. Like, I never expected to join the army. And by the way, thank your husband for his service. It's amazing what he does.
Thanks.
But the army was hard and it sucked, but it actually gave me so much back. So much. Like, it really prepared me, I think, for the rest of my life. And so that's how I view it. It's just, we'll be okay. Yeah, there's scary things, but like, don't fixate on them and just stay close to the Lord. Look at your past experience and just have hope. Try and nurture your hope. That's how I approach everything.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. So let's see. Okay, it's been about an hour. So I guess we'll wrap it up here. There's so much more that we could have talked about. Maybe we'll do this again some other time. And everyone else that I've interviewed, I'm sure I'll talk to you guys again too. Oh, my wife wanted to.
Yay, Jenica.
Come over here, like right here. Okay. So your head's right here.
Okay, I've moved this
a
little bit. That was a very good talk or interview.
Do you have any thoughts?
You're still recording.
Oh, you're still recording? Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody.
You look great.
Thanks. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me while you guys were talking, and it was talking. Well, I'll just let you know what came to my thoughts. I wish I remember who had said this, but it was one of the women in the general presidency, or the women's general presidency, whatever. It said something like, okay, let me climb up to this. Nowadays, many women, and it's being pushed that it's okay to be, what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know.
Active people and not active people.
Just like
that.
I don't really know. Either be active or inactive.
No, like socially awkward or socially not awkward. What are those terms for people?
Losers?
No. No. Okay, I'll just say it without the terms. Many people, like, I'll see on doorsteps unwelcome signs. It's come a thing to not let people in and not
like
no
rude.
solicit?
No, I'm not meaning that.
Like rude, like it's okay to be rude, have rude bumper stickers. Like, it's okay to people
are pushing people away, and it's okay to be not out there finding friends. It's okay to be a loner, and it's okay to just be by yourself. And the quote that was given for women is just like, don't do that. You're given so many gifts. to use, and be out there, make friends. Don't hide your light under a bushel. Be what God wants you to be, and channel those inner thoughts. Don't just, or those inner feelings of excitement to be around other women and other people to bring about good things, because just as the prophet said, or that we will bring about more people coming into the church, and that's how. And if you want to be a part of it, you need to step out of your comfort zone and join in that group of women who are welcoming and kind and loving and want friendships, and not someone who just hides and says, sorry, I'm done, I don't want any more friends, I'm good where I'm at, leave me alone, nobody come to my house.
Being antisocial.
Yes, antisocial. And yeah, sorry, I can't believe those words didn't come to mind, but that's what I was thinking. And I feel like, yeah, that's what came to my thoughts, is that.
Very good.
Thank you.
I'm going to close it up because it's about to.
Okay, bye everyone. Bye.
You guys are awesome. Thank you for what you're both are doing.
Thank you too. I hope more, again, if anyone is thinking or having any promptings about doing a YouTube channel, contact me. At this point, I'll just do it for everybody. Screw it. I'll do it with everybody. Yeah, so thank you everyone. Thank you, Rachel, for your time. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm sure we'll talk again at some point. And yeah. Now, for everybody, I'm going to put the link for her channel in the description below. She's also featured on my homepage, so you can find it there too. So please make sure to subscribe. She's going to have a lot of good things that she's going to be talking about. And it'll be interesting to see her comments like after every general conference, because I'm sure that this trend will just probably continue more and more about women and their importance in these last days. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure to do so. If you liked the video, liked it, put your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share this with anyone that would find this conversation interesting and helpful. And I'll talk to you guys later.